Hello, my subscribers and my learners to my channel, Learn with Mr. Mwenya. Today we proceed with the Russian history. As I indicated to you in previous videos that Russian history, it's a lengthy one and therefore we'll be covering it in bits. So previously we were looking at the revolution of March 1917. So we are just continuing there. So how did this March 17 revolution take place? How did the March 1917 revolution take place? This is what I'll cover. I'll also cover with the provisional government in this video and the failures and the successes. Let's go. So we are saying that as the world war dragged on in the early months of 1917, as the World War dragged on in the early months of 1917, riots broke out in Petrograd. Petrograd sometimes is a city that is sometimes referred to as St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg. So, as the war dragged on, Tsar is at the battlefront. He has left Tsarina, the wife, and Grigor Rasputin. You know, the situation just became ungovernable. Okay? Rioters, mobs of people went about in the streets demanding for certain things. Obviously, from here, second point, mobs of people roamed the streets demanding for bread and peace as the slogan. Why are we talking about the slogan bread? It is because of hunger. Why are we talking about peace? It is because they wanted that Tsar should put an end to the war. They should back down and just bring about peace. Further, city bakeries were looted by hungry rioters. The many troops ordered to bring the situation under control did not take the command and instead did join the protesters. Okay? Rioters went about in the streets, looted shops. I think you have seen this is usually what happens when people just... Okay, so I did say that city bakeries were looted by hungry rioters. Many troops ordered to bring the situation under control did not take the command and instead joined the protesters. Obviously, you have seen usually when people want to show frustration at something towards the government, usually people take to the streets and they will loot people's shops. I think you have seen this with the cases of xenophobia in South Africa and even in many countries. This is what happened. The soldiers who should have been there to bring law and to bring about law and order, they participated in looting those shops. Alright, lawlessness and disorder spread from one Russian city to another, and by the time the Tsar was returning home from war to his palace, the situation had gotten out of hand and it was clear that he had lost full control. So he comes back to his place in Russia. He found that the situation is full-blown. He clearly understood that he had lost control. Therefore, we proceed. Therefore, the Russian parliament, which I've discussed in the previous videos to say the Russian parliament Duma was created out of the October Manifesto document that was promised. So the Duma was still active even by 1917. So on the 12th, this forced the Russian parliament, Duma, to quickly convene on 12th of March 1917 to form a provisional government that would bring law and order to the state. So the parliament had to realize to say, the Tsar, the emperor has lost control. What do we do? Within the parliament, they had to form a leadership structure that would become a provisional government, a temporal government. Therefore, on March 15th, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, meaning stepped down the Russian throne as emperor to allow the provisional government to take charge. So he stepped down, 15th March 1917. So Prime Minister George Vov was elected by the Duma, but this George Vov, Prime Minister, head of the Provisional Government, only lasted for about 5 months or under 6 months, because that is between March 15, 1917 to 20 July 1917. He only lasted for about 5 months, and Alexander Kerensky replaced him as the head of the Provisional Government. Right, so we have got Alexander Kerensky. Still 1917. What are the expectations of the people? So the expectations of the people are that, one, they should draw up a new constitution. You understand that for any government to run, there should be a document called the constitution. So there was need for a new constitution to be drawn up. That was the responsibility of the Provisional Government. Number two, to put an end to the World War I. People are demanding for peace, so the World War I should come to an end. Further, to set up an election program and to elect a legitimate government. To set up an election program and date to elect a legitimate government. What we mean here is that the provisional government should make sure that a process of selecting a new government structure is put in place, because they are a provisional government. They have not been elected by the people. The people should choose, so there should be a program and a date set for that. 4, peasants were expecting to receive their land from their masters, the nobles. You remember that hierarchical structure? Yes, the nobles. At once, the expectations that we want land, we demand land to ourselves. City workers, these people that worked in factories, industries, were hoping that higher wages and more food is given in cities. Higher wages, city. Peasants want land. City dwellers want higher wages and food. Further, 6, the Russian masses expected for the cost of essential goods like fuel and food to be lowered. Obviously, the high cost of living was speaking volumes, and it was the responsibility of the provisional government to try to change the narrative. Lastly, but not the least, to bring about law and order. Obviously, there was chaos that we have talked about. Mobs demonstrated and whatnot, so law and order should be restored. Now, can we say that Alexander Kerensky did not bring about certain achievements? Oh yes, the provisional government and Alexander Kerensky had limited success. What are those? So he introduced several liberties. The provisional government, through Alexander Kerensky, brought about several limited successes, such as equality before the law, meaning this time around people had to appear before the law so that they can exculpate, not where you are just taken to jail without being hanged. Number 2, they abolished death penalty. Tsar ruled with an iron fist, but this time around they said no death penalty. Further, freedom of speech and religion were guaranteed. Freedom of speech and religion were guaranteed. Introduced universal suffrage, meaning women, male, and everyone who is eligible to participate in decision making should be involved. Universal suffrage. Political exiles, those that were sent in exiles, for example, Vladimir Lenin and his friends and others, did not live in Russia because of the threats against their lives. They were made to return back home, and those that were imprisoned were allowed to be released on unconditional basis, and land reforms were introduced, although it was done in a slow pace. It was done at a slow pace. So basically, these are the limited successes of Alexander Kerensky and the provisional government. What about the failures? Let's proceed. All right, so on challenges of Kerensky's administration of the provisional government, number one, it was not considered as a legitimate government for people to fully respect. The fact that it was provisional, it was a temporal government, it was difficult to obey the laws and the policies that it enacted. Further, instead, the Soviet Union, now what are the Soviet Union? Soviet Union are just trade unions or trade organization or organization of workers who come together to demand certain things to be achieved. So in Russia, trade unions, the same way here in Zambia, for example, you have got Zanut, you have got Betus, you have got Union for miners, you have got Union for all workers. These in Russia were called the Soviet Union. So instead, Soviet unions led by revolutionary leaders such as Lenin controlled their own people. So we are saying that the provisional government actually shared the power with the Soviet unions. So it's like there is this side where you have to take orders, there is another side that people are taking orders. Very unfortunate. The Soviets actually claimed ownership of city factories and industries, and this undermined economic power of the government. Here's a situation where workers, they take full control of revenue. It means that government really has lost it. Further, radical revolutionaries like Lenin, this one we are talking about Lenin because Lenin was one of the leading figures of Russian history at the time. So revolutionary leaders like Lenin and others seriously made it their mission to campaign against the provisional government. So the provisional government faced head-on protest or opposition by making sure that they campaigned against the efforts they are trying to make as a provisional government. Failure to put an end to World War I and continuing to fight, hoping to win the war, made the provisional government unpopular. The provisional government was expected to end the war, but they continued. Hence, the Bolsheviks under Lenin, they campaigned with the slogan, bread, peace, and land, which appealed to many masses. So this was like a failure to them. High cost of living, like fuel, food, and other essential goods, decampaign the provisional government. People want to have a low cost of living. So the fact that it was high, it did not help the provisional government. Lack of loyal soldiers to enforce law and order. Some soldiers actually sided with the Soviet leaders. This also was a problem. Divided loyalty by the soldiers. How do you enforce law? Last but not the least, peasants also carried out their revolution by seizing land from their nobles, masters. So you understand that all this was chaos after chaos, and by October, November, thereabout, the provisional government found it very difficult, and the Bolsheviks under Lenin had made a decision to seize authority and control of the provisional government by ushering in a Bolshevik government. This is where we are at. Until next time, bye.